scorched Altadena, torching everything in its path. Homes, wealth, and legacy burned in one night.
Missed it
Will Altadena rise from the ashes? I'm James Farr. On the Conversation Live Altadena Rising, we're chronicling the recovery, the resilience, and justice for the nation. This is the show of record, unapologetically progressive. We're not blacking down. So join me, James Farr, on the Conversation Live, Altadena Rising, every Saturday at 10 a.m. Pacific with the rebroadcast on Sunday at noon.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
We gon' get it right. We gon' get it right. We gon' get it right. We gon' get it right.
Protests and anthems, yes, we chanting a movement of people. It's like we dancing to the ministry of. It's the energy of, in memory of them that we love. The trinity of the people, the peace, the power, the truth. We speak the powers even louder. We can say it blacker, we can say it prouder. A woman vice president that went to Howard. Now we talk helping black businesses, and our differences is magnificent. Bringing light to the point where the prisons is. I was told good life is where forgiveness lives. The ascension is to leave what's left behind and feed the seeds for deeds that bless the mind, caress the mind, and question justify. With you and God in time, my best align.
You're listening to A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Dr. Nii-Quartelai, your host and chief White House correspondent. I'm in touch, and so guess what? You be in touch. Follow me on all the social media platforms at Dr. Nii-Quartelai. Just type in Dr. Nii-Q, just DrNiiQ. And there I am, fresh for you to follow. Also, be sure to download the KBLA app to listen to us live or on demand, or simply tell Alexa to play KBLA Talk 1580, and there we are for your listening pleasure. Last but not least, subscribe to A More Perfect Union podcast. That way you'll never, ever, ever miss an episode. In case you didn't know, right here at KBLA Talk 1580, we have launched the Fired But Not Forgotten Testimony Project, where we're looking for federal workers, particularly Black federal workers, who have been impacted by the mass firings here in Washington and beyond. We know that federal workers aren't just in Washington, D.C. or in the D.C., Maryland, Virginia area. They're everywhere. And we want to hear your story. We want to amplify your story in the spirit of investigative storytelling, in the tradition of the Black press, in the tradition of collecting your testimony, as our people have done for many, 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 many moons. And so be sure to email us at info@smileyAudiomedia.com. That's info@smileyAudiomedia.com. You can also utilize the open mic feature on your KBLA app to record your story. And we just might reach back and amplify your story right here on the airwaves. And so be sure to check that out. Now, it's time for you to decide the good, bad, and ugly headlines of the day. Let me first just say I would be remiss if I did not talk about the executive order that President Trump signed today at the White House, beginning the process of dismantling the U.S. Department of Education. That is not fake news. That is that's news that we can verify. And don't you worry, because in our second hour, we'll be talking to Dr. Jonathan Collins over at Columbia University about what all of this means. For those of you that tap in regularly, you know we've had Dr. Collins on the show frequently, and he's been tracking this very closely and can separate the fact from the fiction in terms of what this new executive order dismantling the U.S. Department of Education, what does it mean for you? What does it mean for the students and teachers in places like LA, where our home station is, where the second largest school district in the country is. And so you better believe we have you covered on that front. But on to the good, bad, and ugly headlines of the day. Kicking us off, the Associated Press is reporting that they're reporting that the senior senator, I believe, Bennett from Colorado, said the quiet part out loud on Dem leaders. He says it's important for people to know when it's time to go. That's right. NPR is reporting that Colorado Democratic Senator Michael Bennett stopped short Wednesday of calling on Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer to step down from leadership, but came pretty darn close, saying, quotes, "I don't think on the leadership question, it's always better to examine whether folks are in the right place. And we're certainly going to have that conversation." This is what he said at a town hall. But Schumer, as many of you know, has come under widespread criticism from House Democrats and within his own caucus for voting to advance the GOP legislation that would prevent a shutdown on the federal government. Schumer had signaled that Republicans didn't have the votes to advance the spending measure, but later shifted course, arguing the bill's passage was the lesser of two evils. Senator Bennett, who's 60 years old, recalled how he was the first Senate Democrat to say he didn't think then President Joe Biden could win re-election after his poor debate performance. Bennett's comments came after Maryland Representative Glenn Ivey also called for new leadership for the Senate Democrats. Schumer was supposed to be on the road this week promoting his new book. Those events were either postponed or canceled, with one venue citing security concerns. And ProPublica is reporting that killing grants that have saved lives. Trump's cut signal an end to government work on terrorism prevention. I saw the story and absolutely had to share it with you because it sums up so much of where we are at today. You see, soon after there was an issue. There was a stranger that knocked on the door of a synagogue in Colleyville, Texas, during a Shabbat service, and soon after he was invited in for tea, a visitor pulled out a pistol and demanded the release of an Al-Qaeda-linked detainee from a nearby federal prison, seizing as hostages a rabbi and 3 worshipers. The standoff lasted 10 hours until the rabbi, drawing on extensive security training, hurled a chair at the assailant and the hostages escaped. You see, the averted tragedy at Congregation Beth Israel is cited as a success story for the largely unseen prevention work that federal authorities have relied on for years in the fight to stop terrorist attacks and mass shootings. The government weaves together partnerships with academic researchers and community groups across the country as a part of a strategy for addressing violent extremism as a public health concern. A specialized intervention team at Boston's Children's Hospital, they treat young patients, some referred by the FBI, who show signs of disturbing violent behavior. Eradicate Hate. It's a national prevention umbrella group. They say one of its trainees helped thwart a school shooting in California last year by reporting a gun in a fellow student's backpack. And in other programs, counselors guide neo-Nazis out of the white power movement or help families of Islamist extremists undo the effects of violent propaganda. You know what the through line is? The through line for this work is federal funding, a reliance on grants that are rapidly disappearing as the Trump administration guts billions in spending. And so, with all these headlines that are coming out about, cuts in this agency and this department, cuts that also all seem so willy-nilly. We have yet to see any sort of comprehensive plan presented to the American people outside of Project 2025, of course. We lack to see a plan presented to the people on how they intend to pare down our government, to, dare I say, eliminate what we've known to be essential agencies and essential workers in our government. We haven't seen a plan. And there is such a thing as unintended consequences. Now, who knows? A lot of this could be very much intentional, right? But in any sort of change that's being engineered, there are unintentional consequences. And it's important that we're all clear on what those things could be in the name of our national security and the name of public safety. You know, tens of millions of dollars slated for violence prevention has been cut or frozen pending review as President Trump's Department of Government Efficiency steamrolls the national security sector. And barring action from Congress or the courts, counterterrorism professionals say that the White House appears poised to end the government's backing of prevention work on urgent threats. That cannot be a good thing. We're divesting from prevention. And think about it, if we're divesting from prevention on issues related to counterterrorism, what about public health? What about public education? What about so many other areas that are important in terms of advancing the public interest for good? When we come forward, we're going to dig into and behind some of these headlines with my next guest. I'm really delighted that today, of all days, I have a chance to talk to my colleague, Shar Jossell. She is the president of the National Association of Black Journalists Los Angeles chapter. She is a very well-respected journalist that covers a whole lot of trending news topics and pop culture topics. And she is here for us to try and make sense out of this topsy-turvy week. You are listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. More when we come forward.
You're listening to A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
The revolution will not be televised.
What's up? It is Killer Mike, also known as Michael Render, and I'm encouraging you to listen to More Not Less of Truth Time with Dr. Cornel West and Senator Nina Turner on KBLA Talk 1580.
We all hear the radio ads about the IRS. They tell you to be afraid, to be scared, and they try to frighten you into calling. I'm not here to do that. Tax Relief Advocates is different. TRA is here to tell you that if you owe money to the IRS, whether it's $5,000, $50,000, or $500,000, we have a solution. It doesn't matter if you're sitting in your car, at work, or with your kids. No matter where you are, call now. 800-550-9651. Don't lose hope. TRA can eliminate or reduce what you owe to the IRS. Generous programs are now available that can give you a fresh start. Our passion is taxes and helping individuals fix their IRS problems. We have over 1,000 5-star reviews on Google and an A+ with the Better Business Bureau. You don't need to be afraid of the IRS any longer. End your tax nightmare today by visiting us online at TRA.com or call 800-550-9651. That's 800-550-9651. Tax Relief Advocates. Real solutions for real people.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. LA County's new Justice Care and Opportunities Department, or JCOD, is here to support justice-involved individuals and their families. The JCOD Support Center is now taking calls at 1-833-LAC-JCOD. That's 1-833-522-5263. Available 7 days a week from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m., the Support Center is your one-stop shop for re-entry issues and court support. They offer court reminders, providers, connections to local services, transportation assistance for housing, court appearances, and childcare. The JCOD hotline provides personalized help to connect you with services that you need. And don't forget to check out justiceconnect.org for more information. Remember, it's free and available every day at 1-833-522-5263. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio that's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
Hit me.
National news of consequence, informed opinion, and analysis beyond the headlines. You're listening to A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580.
You are listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Dr. Nii-Quartelai, and really delighted to welcome my friend and colleague, Shar Jossell. She is an award-winning journalist, a celebrated host and MC, and she is a native of the Chicagoland area. While a lot of you may be familiar with Shar's work in the entertainment industry, which is her primary focus, she also writes at the intersection of gender politics, race, and pop culture. Welcome, Shar.
Hi, Dr. Nii-Quartelai. Thank you so much for having me. This is exciting.
Well, thank you so much for being here and helping us to sort of make sense out of what's been a week of really disturbing headlines. Last time we saw each other was at the Better Brothers LA event this past Saturday, and shout out to all the brothers that for the past 11 years have been bringing folks together to celebrate sort of the Black queer genius in greater LA and beyond. But NBC News is reporting that the Trump administration is considering a plan to eliminate the CDC's HIV prevention division. This is serious business. It feels like just as we are on the cusp of potentially finding a cure for HIV in our lifetime, to have this sort of government support scuttled at this time seems to be a great tragedy. What do you make of it?
You know, it's one of those things that has been echoing a reoccurring theme within this administration, which is a repeated attack on the most vulnerable. When I read this news, I was not necessarily shocked, but every time, and you might be able to relate to this, but every time I get a new news alert, it's like another thing, another reaction, and another thing. And I think that this is going to set us back. I know it'll set us back. It'll set us back in HIV research. And I have friends that work in the HIV prevention field. It's going to affect their jobs, and it's going to affect messaging. And perhaps one of the more disheartening facts facing the rollback on this is that HIV is statistically affecting people younger and younger. It's like, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, like ages 13 to 24 have the highest cases right now. And so that is what really breaks my heart, because a lack of information and a lack of education inherently means a lack of resources oftentimes, because people don't know where to turn, where to look, or where to get their information in order to either prevent or treat, this disease.
That's right. And, we're hearing this, there's a memo that's been circling among HIV prevention advocates. I've seen, friends and colleagues and leaders on the front lines posting on social media about rumors that this plan could be implemented within the next 48 hours. Some sources saying it'd be a little bit longer than that. But right now, the focus may be on HIV, but what's the likelihood that this may extend to other public health interventions like PrEP, which is really helped to prevent the next generation of folks from being impacted by HIV in the way that a lot of our older Americans were impacted by HIV?
The likelihood is pretty high. It's pretty great the likelihood. And, you know, I think the first indication of an attack on our healthcare was when Roe v. Wade was overturned a few years ago. And, you know, Project 2025 is something that's here. It's not on the way. It's not, you know, being developed. It is here, and they are implementing it. And whatever guardrails they can lift, whatever guardrails they can circumvent, they are. And so it won't stop here. And I think that that's been probably some of the more frustrating aspect of this, is because it was like, you know, when people were really warning about Project 2025 and warning about a second Trump term a few months ago, a lot of people were written off as alarmists. And it's like, now we're here, and there don't appear to be any checks and balances, and things are happening, and they're happening in real time, and they're happening rapidly. And it seems unrepentant. And so I'm really scared to see, because once they're done with HIV, they're then going to come and inherently get something else, you know, go after something else. So it's very concerning.
Well, speaking of going after, you know, something else, the New York Times reporting that the White House plans to pause $175 million for the University of Pennsylvania over their transgender policy. For folks who are less familiar, the Trump administration said this past Wednesday that it would suspend about $175 million in federal funding to the University of Pennsylvania over its approach to transgender athletes. This, according to the White House social media account. The move would intensify the government's campaign against transgender people participating in public life and escalate a clash with elite colleges. Why does this seem to be the chosen method of this administration to basically weaponize federal funding for universities, federal funding for research in their, you know, quest to eliminate anything related to diversity, equity, and inclusion?
I think that they are really driving this point home with I mean, again, Project 2025, one of the goals is to eradicate trans people from public life. And that one could argue as a whole. And I think that, you know, this is so silly. It's so silly. You know, Leah Thomas was a part of the sports in 2022. She's not even a student at the university anymore. I think it's also asinine to really punish an entire university and punish the student body based on one person. But I also think that's part of the insidious goal here. You know, there's not a lot of information and not a lot of representation about trans people. There just isn't. We are, you know, a very, very tiny, vulnerable, marginalized community. And the right has really leaned into this highly orchestrated, manufactured culture war. And when you stack the numbers and the statistics and the data up against what is being presented, it's really nonsensical. We're 1%, I believe less than 1% of the population. And so, but when you have lack of resource and lack of information, and you're dealing with confirmation bias along with religious institutions, people draw their own conclusions when there's a lack of information. And so I think that is why the campaign, the anti-trans campaign, has been so successful. But if people don't see this for what it is and really sit with this and litigate this and interrogate this, then the White House is going to win in their messaging, and they're going to further demonize, and they're going to further dehumanize an already vulnerable part of our population. And so again, I think it's asinine to do this, but it's one thing. Transphobia unites everyone, the right, the center, and the left. And I'll close with this. It is increasingly frustrating seeing, and please feel free to weigh in and push back if you happen to disagree, but the trans community appears to be the only community of people where everybody keeps having conversations about and around them, and no trans people are on platforms to speak to their lived experiences. And so I think that
everywhere but here.
everywhere but here. But I'm saying it's happening, you know, with the right, left, and center on major outlets and in major platforms. And I see how easy it is to do, because there's a lack of information, and it's one thing that can unite people. And it's a big distraction. It's a big distraction. It's a big look over there while they're gutting Social Security, while they're getting people's pensions while they're rolling back, the Department of Education. And so it's all political theater, but at whose expense,
No, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. And I think there's also a critique there for folks on the left, just not just folks on the right, but folks on the left who I think ignore the fact that trans people also care about access to affordable health care. Trans people also care about access to affordable housing. They also care about a lot of the things that a lot of other people care about. And I think sometimes, particularly in the recent election cycle, I think trans people were made out to appear as if they cared a whole lot about athletic sports and participating in sports.
And
right?
they don't.
And that may matter to some people, but in the hierarchy of needs for trans people, I never understood why folks on the left, were dying on that hill, considering what the consequence would be.
Right.
If, this administration's Project 2025 went out.
Can you even name 3 trans athletes?
Right.
Just 3? No, a lot of people can't. Because, like I said, trans people are 1% of the population. On the athletic side, it's even smaller. So I think it's nonsensical, but it will appeal to certain people's confirmation bias. And it should be noted that this is a direct attack specifically on trans women, girls, and femmes.
Yeah.
There's trans men. There's documentaries about trans men in wrestling and all different types of things, but no one talks about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I also wonder why that is, why the inherent attack is on one end and not the other.
Shar, in our remaining minute, I want to ask you, as president of the National Association of Black Journalists Los Angeles chapter, can you share with us just sort of one bit of advice you would offer to Black journalists that are attempting to cover a time such as this?
I'd say make space, do your research, just as you would be annoyed if people had a panel discussing Black issues and the politic of Black people in this country. And if no Black people are on that panel, I think it's every journalist's responsibility. If you're talking about any group of people, whether they be indigenous or disabled, trans, gay, you have to have people there who walk the walk, talk the talk, and have the lived experience to speak to it. It's crazy to me. And so I would that would be my tip to specifically Black journalists who already are coming from a marginalized position, for people to really sit down when they're doing their segment producing and their show producing and be like, well, something here doesn't look right,
Well, thank you for blessing our reporter roundtable here on A More Perfect Union. Shar, we're going to have you back again soon. Thanks for all that you do. And folks, if you haven't already, you should tap into some of the work of the National Association of Black Journalists LA chapter.
We're working very hard.
In which case, I'm a member, right? Yes. And so thank you, Madam President.
You need to come to our meetings, Nii-Quartelai.
When I'm not in Washington, D.C., Madam President.
Okay.
You've been listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580.
If you're looking to be engaged, enlightened, and empowered about issues related to national politics, elections, identity, culture change, and social justice, you tuned into the right place. A More Perfect Union continues when we come forward.
I'm Amber Payton with 4 Things You Should Know with BIN News. A bill to ban DEI initiatives at Ohio public colleges is moving closer to becoming law. The House passed an amended version of Senate Bill 1. It bans diversity, equity, and inclusion practices and strikes by faculty members. New York's highest court has struck down non-citizen voting in the city, ruling it unconstitutional. The law signed by Black Mayor Eric Adams in 2022 allowed non-citizens to vote in municipal elections. A civic group is calling for Kansas City manager Brian Platt's removal after a jury ruled he suggested staff lie to the media. The Urban Council sent a letter to Black Mayor Quentin Lewis and the City Council urging his ouster. And President Trump plans to sign an executive order today to eliminate the Department of Education, returning control to states. NAACP President Derek Johnson calls it a dark day for students relying on federal support. Get BIN News on demand 24/7 on the iHeartRadio app.
crash in Hollywood. This is on the 101 southbound at Vermont, second lane from the left blocked. Big delays here, backing up away from Cahuenga. Also, let's check out that 5 southbound in Burbank. Delays from Olive, and then it gets really heavy and slow as you continue all the way to Lakewood Boulevard. Still crowded ahead to the 605. Tough out of Pasadena, 210 eastbound, loading up at Lincoln. Delays all the way to Citrus. You've got a little crowded condition right around the 57 in San Dimas and ahead in Upland from Baseline to the 15.
Imagine a photograph of your favorite place in California. Then right in the middle of it, one piece of litter. Litter has no place in our lives, not one piece. Together, let's change that. Clean California. Zero litter is the goal. CleanCA.com.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
I'm a bad man. The Lakers will have to play tonight's home game against Milwaukee without Luka Doncic. Doncic has a sprained right ankle. He played 32 minutes Wednesday night, and the Lakers win over Denver. The Lakers want Doncic to sit out tonight to avoid further injury in a back-to-back game. LeBron is also out tonight. No word yet on LeBron's status. LeBron has been out since March 8th with a groin injury. The UCLA men's basketball team plays their first game tonight in the NCAA tournament. The Bruins, a 7th seed in the Midwest Regional, face number 10 Utah State in Lexington, Kentucky. 6:25 p.m. tip-off on TNT. Casey Wasserman, the agent for hip-hop superstar Kendrick Lamar, said the Compton native will play a major role in the opening ceremonies for the Summer Olympics in LA in 2028. The opening ceremonies are scheduled for July 14th at SoFi Stadium. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
On January 7th, 2025, the Eaton Canyon fire scorched Altadena, torching everything in its path. Homes, wealth, and legacy burned in one night. But will Altadena rise from the ashes? I'm James Farr. On the Conversation Live, Altadena Rising, we're chronicling the recovery, the resilience, and justice for the nation. This is the show of record, unapologetically progressive. We're not blacking down. So join me, James Farr, on the Conversation Live, Altadena Rising, every Saturday at 10 a.m. Pacific with the rebroadcast on Sunday at noon.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
They say the hardest part of getting something done is getting started. Well, we did that 30 years ago, when California first took on the tobacco industry. Now, smoking is down 60%, lung cancer 42%. A couple of our cities have already ended tobacco sales. A California without big tobacco isn't just possible, it's already happening. See our progress at undo.org.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. If you need help getting your resume in order, finding job training, or landing a job, we've got 3 great options for you. First, the City of Los Angeles has work source centers across the area offering free job support. The California Workforce Development Board can help you with everything from GED prep to vocational training at no cost to you. On the federal level, the Department of Labor's American Job Centers offer a full range of services for job seekers and businesses alike. Visit careeronestop.org, or for more info, just call California's Help Center or visit cwdb.ca.gov or call 916-657-1440. For the City of Los Angeles programs, go to ewd.lacity.gov or call 213-744-7300. All these services are free to help you get your next job. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. Now back to building a more perfect union on KBLA Talk 1580.
You are listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Dr. Nii-Quartelai, and delighted to welcome back to the show my friend, our friend, Dr. Jonathan Collins, professor over at Columbia University, to help us make sense, if that's even possible, when it comes to some of these headlines, specifically President Trump today signing an executive order attempting to abolish the Department of Education, an unconstitutional violation of the separations of power, according to some advocates. This isn't about, quotes, returning control to the states. It's about imposing his hateful Project 2025 agenda on every classroom in the country. That's what we're hearing from leaders in the field like Kelly Robinson, the president of the Human Rights Campaign. I saw earlier that Derek Johnson, the president of the NAACP, put up a post saying, quote, signing an executive order that jeopardizes our children's future while they're in the room. The irony here is almost as loud as the injustice. Dr. Collins, what's your reaction to the president's attempt to dismantle the U.S. Department of Education?
It's just a political onslaught. It's just a war on American education, and not just American education, but the one symbol of American education that really represented a march toward equality. You know, so the Department of Education emerges in the late 1970s. I believe President Carter, signed this into law to create the Department of Education in, I believe, 1979. And the idea here was to create an agency that would house these different initiatives that were aimed towards not just promoting education, but trying to make the education system more just, more fair, and more accessible to groups of folks, especially Black folks, eventually brown folks, kids with disabilities, folks who had been people who had gone through the court of law, and it had been established that they had been victims of legal discrimination. And so the Department of Education was here to sort of right those wrongs and start to make investments that were very much dedicated towards addressing their specific needs. And so, the Department of Education, is it perfect? No. But it was the one thing that got us focused on the kids who often get pushed to the margins. And so to completely gut it the way that it's being handled right now, I mean, it's just all of the resources and the infrastructure is just being pulled from within. And we're going to look up in 10, 15 years from now, and we're going to look back on this moment and realize this is the moment where inequality just really took an expansion to a different level.
And just to your point about inequality going to the next level, I think one of the things that I've noticed is missing from the reporting of this executive order being signed today by the president is, if you start the clock at 1979, when President Carter helped to establish the U.S. Department of Education, I think you missed the point of it, right? We forget that there was this decision, the Brown versus Board of Education, that said separate is not equal. And there were a lot of states that fought tooth and nail from the 50s when that decision came down from the Supreme Court, certainly well into our lifetime, have fought to not implement that. And it was the U.S. Department of Education that played a role in helping to implement Brown versus Board of Education, no?
Absolutely. Everything all the progress that we made after Brown v. Board was institutionalized through the U.S. Department of Education. I mean, you think about, so I grew up in Jackson, Tennessee. My high school, Jackson Central Mary, it didn't actually integrate until the mid 1970s. There was a reason why there were 3 different Brown cases forcing the quote unquote all deliberate speed move to finally desegregate schools. And when we saw President Johnson create the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965, this was the creation of the programs that were used as essentially like the carrots to say, look, we know you guys really don't want to integrate schools. We know you really believe that Black kids are this stain on the community and this plague that should not be allowed to enter our school system. But if we give you this money, can you please allow for this to happen? And it was through the creation of the special title programs. It was essentially looking at the school system, at the American education system, as something where we either had to use National Guards from the states to force the actual integration of schools, or again, we had to dangle these carrots of funds or threaten the withdrawal of funding for schools to actually desegregate. And it was the Department of Education that really formulated the very consistent investment in schools to pursue these kinds of equitable paths. And so, yeah, like we don't get, it was our history of educational inequality that pretty much set us on this trajectory to even have a Department of Education. And so again, it's not even just about what the Department of Education does. It's symbolically what it represents, what it means. It's America's stamp of, hey, we care about education as an instrument of equality. And now that's potentially being taken away.
Talk to me about what this means for some of the students in places like Los Angeles, the second largest school district in the country. It's where I started my public affairs and advocacy career many, many, many years ago. LA is the place that you used to call home. You know the terrain very well. What does a decision like this mean in the immediate term and potentially the long term for school districts like LAUSD that have, a mix of students, English language learners, students with special needs, students with learning disabilities and other disabilities? What does this mean in the short and long term?
Oh, this means everything. If you go through the list of the title programs, LAUSD is a perfect example of how federal investment has been a crutch. It has been a key to the operation of schools that are essentially thrust with the responsibility of educating kids who come from major disadvantages. And so whether you're talking about the LAUSD having one of the highest percentages of students who qualify for free or reduced lunch, whether you're talking about having one of the highest percentages of students who speak English as a non-primary language, when you're talking about students with disabilities, LAUSD has everything that we need to be paying attention to, and they have every group that is most likely to suffer from the removal of those funds.
It's scary. It's scary stuff. And I'm also talking about students that are on the school lunch and school breakfast programs, right? One of the things I was hearing Pastor Jamal Bryant of New Birth Church in Atlanta in an interview he did with my colleague April Ryan recently, he was talking about some of the darkest days of the pandemic and how he had come to realize that there were a number of parents that were against the school shutting down because they knew they could rely on the school for their kids to get a solid meal, maybe two, every day.
Yeah. Our school systems have become one of our most vital social services, right? Like the point of school in America is not just school, and especially if you're growing up Black and poor. School is everything. It's where you get meals. It's where you build community. It's where you find people who love and care about you. It's where you build community. It's where you learn about arts. It's where you learn about your history, your identity, who you are. Everything that is essential to our mental health essentially is happening at the school. And when you weaken the capacity of school to be these spaces for these positive things, this is an incredibly detrimental impact on kids.
And so where do Democrats go from here? That's what I want to know. Where do Democrats go from here? We know that Senator Schumer is still catching it from other folks, elected folks in the party, from Democratic activists for his decision to go along with Republicans and delivering what looked like a clear win to Donald Trump with regard to the continuing resolution to keep the government open through September. When we come forward, Dr. Collins, I want you to read the political tea leaves. Is there an opening for Democrats to finally stand up and be the opposition party that folks are hungry for, as opposed to playing it small like the minority party? We'll get Dr. Collins' take on that and more when we come forward. You're listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580.
Striving to make America a nation as good as its promise. This is A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
One of life's greatest mysteries has finally been solved.
Who let the dogs out? Spruce.
It's Spruce, the new hardworking, worry-free weed and grass killer that's safe for use around people and pets. When used as directed, spray the leaves for visible results in just 1 hour and dead weeds in just 1 day. You spray, they play. Weeds die by the next day. Find Spruce wherever weed killers are sold.
Oh no, stomach issues again?
Stomach issues? Who are you? Your pancreas. I could be the real reason for your diarrhea, gas, bloating, stomach pain, or loose oily stools.
I thought it was my stomach.
People often do, but any of these symptoms could mean having a condition called exocrine pancreatic insufficiency, or EPI. With EPI, the pancreas doesn't release enough enzymes to break down food, but EPI is manageable. Use the symptom checker on identifyepi.com and speak with your doctor. That's identifyepi.com. Sponsored by AbbVie.
Financial Group is not a law firm. If you own a timeshare, don't miss this public service announcement from Chuck McDowell, founder of Wesley Financial Group.
If you receive an unsolicited phone call or mail piece to discuss selling, renting, or especially canceling your timeshare, don't fall for it. If you really want out of your timeshare, hang the phone up immediately or throw that mail piece in the trash and contact your timeshare resort or Wesley Financial Group for assistance with your timeshare. As the only Inc. 500 timeshare cancellation company, our knowledge, experience, and results has made Wesley a trusted resource for over 40,000 families we've helped get out of their timeshare. Give us a call and I'll send you our timeshare exit information kit free with the straight facts about your timeshare and all of your options for cancellation.
Call for your free info kit, 800-511-2112. That's 800-511-2112. 800-511-2112.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 reminds you, when we fight, we win. The Youth Justice Coalition is challenging America's addiction to incarceration and discrimination. YJC works to dismantle policies leading to mass incarceration, law enforcement violence, and the school-to-prison pipeline. Their approach, transformative justice, community intervention, free LA high school, legal defense, and system monitoring. YJC promotes safety without relying on prisons. Their goal, prevent system contact and help people exit the system through direct action, advocacy, and education. Want to get involved or need help? Call 323-235-4243. That's 323-235-4243. Join YJC in creating change. When we fight, we win. KBLA Talk 1580, your voice for justice. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
We face tragedy, but we don't fall into despair. We continue our work to build a more perfect union.
You are listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Dr. Nii-Quartelai Corte, and really delighted to be in conversation on a day like this, in particular, with Dr. Jonathan Collins, a professor over at Columbia University, who has been tracking this effort to dismantle the U.S. Department of Education. We have always known that the only way to truly get rid of the U.S. Department of Education is through Congress. Congress establishes it, Congress gets rid of it, right? But short of any congressional action, specifically legislation eliminating the U.S. Department of Education, I'm hearing Republicans on Capitol Hill say, well, we don't need legislation to do that. We could essentially zero out the budget of the U.S. Department of Education through the reconciliation process that's currently underway, and that does the job. Is that true, Dr. Collins?
Essentially, yes, that they could actually just vote to gut the budget of the Department of Education and effectively end the programs. Well, the programs will still exist basically as shells, but they would essentially be empty shells. So, whether it's the Title I programs, whether it's Title VII programs that support students who are English language learners, all of these programs would be still in existence, but there would be no money to fund them. So, Yeah, that is a big concern with the budgetary debates that are happening.
And this may be a put up or shut up moment for Democrats. Today, during his remarks, President Trump said, quotes, "The Democrats know it's right, and I hope they're going to be voting for it because ultimately it may come before them." That's what he told hundreds of supporters assembled for the signing at the White House. President Trump also said that federal Title I funds for schools in high poverty regions, funding for students with disabilities, Pell Grants, and student loans will be, quote, fully preserved and still administered by the department. Federal education programs such as Title I are set by Congress and would require congressional approval to alter, as I just mentioned. Dr. Collins, did the president just tell a lie?
The president is very good at, telling us things that maybe are not quite as meaningful as he seems to suggest. And that's kind of been the issue with the Department of Education debate the entire time. Like when you talk about true abolition, which, earlier in the segment, this is what we were discussing, the prospect of true abolition of the U.S. Department of Education. Actually getting rid of the department would be tragic. What President Trump is actually in the process of doing is just playing politics with something, right? Like there's a lot of smoke. There are a lot of mirrors, and we are waiting for the actual language on the documents to be released so we can figure out what's real here, because he doesn't have unilateral authority to just like throw the Department of Education in the trash can. What he does have the ability to do is sign an executive order that maybe does some of this work temporarily until it can be adjudicated in the courts. But even if he were to do this, it raises questions of whether or not funding is going to be received in these congressional districts. And a lot of those congressional districts that rely on education funding, guess what? They are Trump country districts. And so if he's any sort of a political, if there's any political sophistication there, he knows that moving forward with some radical sweeping change to the Department of Education, it doesn't hurt just Democrats. It probably hurts Republicans even more.
Mm-hmm. Well, look, right now it's hurting Democrats more than it's hurting Republicans. When you look at some of the public polling out there, Democrats across the country seem to be not just disillusioned, but demoralized. And so my question to you in our remaining minutes, Dr. Collins, is where do Democrats go from here? Do they have it in them to be the kind of opposition party that so many Americans across the political spectrum are hoping and wishing and wanting them to be?
I think they do, but the Democrats have to really divorce the idea of improving the quality of social services and public goods with like spending. And so what we've gotten from Democrats are messages about the importance of spending on education or spending on these different issues. And the spending is important, but I think to the average American, they don't understand exactly how spending more on something leads to a better quality version of it. And I think what Democrats need to shift towards is really giving us a very clear vision of how we want to improve social services that will help your life fundamentally. And so like that's what voters are looking for, not just how improving the investment in whether it's the Department of Education or even, investing in like Medicare and Medicaid. Like we need a vision of how we want better mortality rates. We want better healthcare services, actual like hospital experiences, how like we want early diagnosis to be happening. We want to be able to get rid of like terminal diseases and cure those before they become fatal. Like I just think the Democratic messaging has been more about let's play these spending games about the budget and not selling the American people on what they really have, which are really the progressive and bold ideas. Like that was the Democratic Party that like I think folks fell in love with thinking about like the Obama era and moving forward. And now it just feels like it's like I said, it's a spending war.
And even the FDR era, Big New Deal, right? So, Democrats have a long way to go in their makeover or rebrand, whatever you want to call it. But I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, as somebody who is a Morehouse man, a thing about our historically Black colleges and universities. How should the leadership of HBCUs interpret this moment? And respond to this moment? We know that there was a letter on February 14th that the U.S. Department of Education directed to schools that receive federal funding to exclude race from decisions related to admissions, hiring, promotion, compensation, financial aid, scholarship, prizes, all the things, housing, graduation ceremonies. Is it just a matter of time until we see a blatant attempt to eliminate or severely hobble or undercut our HBCUs?
That's an interesting question. If anything, the HBCUs have an opportunity to really be the thing that exposes the weaknesses and the inconsistency in Trump's logic here. And so historically, black colleges won. So if you remember during Trump's first term, he made a pretty big commitment to historically Black colleges and universities. He hosted Black college and university presidents at the White House. And he made this big deal around like how he was going to extend the support. And he actually did increase financial support towards historically Black colleges and universities during his first term. And we've seen no evidence of the idea that he would want to actually get rid of them. Now we move into this current moment. HBCUs are arguably going to be hit the hardest by the slashing of federal funds for research. So Columbia University, right? We are supposedly losing $400 million in federal funds. The entire group of HBCUs combined, they receive over $200 million in federal funds. So it shows you that one, they're incredibly underfunded, but then two, they're very dependent on federal funding. And so I think step one is to see, how will the Trump administration handle that? Are you going to remove federal funds from historically Black colleges for some of these ideas of promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion? Or are you going to double down on your commitment from your first term? Depending on the path that he chooses, shows us, well, is this really about diversity and equity and inclusion? Or is this really about you picking political adversaries and using the bully pulpit? And I assume that it's going to be the latter.
My thanks to Jonathan Collins, professor of political science over at Columbia University, really helping us to make sense out of these deeply disturbing headlines around the dismantling of the U.S. Department of Education, and more importantly, what that means, right? It's one thing. I don't think people are so much wedded to the agency for the sake of being wedded to the agency, but people are wedded to the mission, and they understand what that mission means in the lives of their kids and in their schools and their communities day to day. And so we're going to continue to stay on this. Dr. Collins, we'll be sure to have you back.
Always a pleasure. Great to see you, Dr. Q.
You too. You too. Have a good weekend. You are listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. More when we come forward.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Amber Payton with 4 Things You Should Know with BIN News. Black Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison is suing the Trump administration for holding up green project funds, joined by AGs from California, Illinois, and Maine. Tulane University in New Orleans is ending its DEI programs, renaming the Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion